On Sunday morning, March 8, 2026, Iran's foreign minister sat down in front of a camera on NBC's Meet the Press. He was speaking to an audience of millions of Americans. He was speaking from a country that the United States military has been bombing for 10 consecutive days. And the anchor, Kristen Welker, asked him directly, "Will Iran accept a ceasefire?" He didn't hesitate. He didn't reach for diplomatic language. He didn't offer conditions or timelines or back-channel hints of flexibility. He said, "We need to continue fighting for the sake of our people." That sentence, spoken calmly, in English, on live American television, is the most consequential diplomatic statement in this war so far, because it tells you exactly where this conflict is going. It tells you that the off-ramp that Washington assumed existed, the ceasefire that a few days of bombing would produce, does not exist. And what makes the moment even more revealing, the secret that was happening simultaneously, behind closed doors, that completely contradicts the defiance on the screen. Stay with me, because this story has two layers, and both of them change everything. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi gave two separate television interviews in the span of 3 days that together form the most complete picture of where Iran stands right now. The first was on Thursday, March 5th, an exclusive interview with NBC nightly news anchor Tom Lamas. The second was Sunday morning, March 8th, a live appearance on NBC's Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. Together, they reveal a government that is simultaneously defiant, strategic, and making a very specific argument to the American public. On whether Iran wants a ceasefire, Araghchi was unambiguous. He told NBC, "We're not asking for a ceasefire, and we don't see any reason why we should negotiate." He explained why with a historical argument that deserves to be taken seriously, even by people who disagree with it. "We negotiated with them twice," he said, "and every time they attacked us in the middle of negotiations." He is referring to the June 2025 12-day war, when the United States and Israel targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, and to the broader diplomatic history of the JCPOA nuclear negotiations, in which Iran says it made concessions that were subsequently abandoned when the U.S. withdrew from the agreement. In Araghchi's framing, America does not negotiate in good faith. America negotiates while preparing the next attack. So why negotiate? On who started this war, his answer was equally direct. This is not our war. This is a war of choice by the United States. On the possibility of a U.S. ground invasion, he struck what can only be described as a dare. Iran is confident it could confront any U.S. ground invasion, he said. He called a ground invasion a big disaster for them, meaning the United States. He said it would be a waste of time. On Sunday's Meet the Press, he went further. He said the U.S. and Israel are killing our people, they're killing girl students, they are attacking hospitals. He referenced the ceasefire from last year's 12-day war and said, "Now you want to ask for a ceasefire again? This doesn't work like this." Then he laid out Iran's actual position. There needs to be a permanent end to the war. Unless we get to that, I think we need to continue fighting for the sake of our people and our security. This is not a position of a government that is about to fold. Now let's look at what the United States is asking for. Because the gap between the two positions is the gap that defines how long this war lasts. President Trump has been equally unambiguous. After Araghchi's Thursday interview, Trump posted on Truth Social that there would be no deal with Iran without unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender. Those are not diplomatic words. Those are World War II words. The words used to describe what was demanded of Japan in August 1945 after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Trump told NBC News he wants Iran to have a good leader and that he has some names in mind for Ayatollah Khamenei's replacement. He said, "Most of the people we had in mind are dead." And then, chillingly, "Pretty soon we are not going to know anybody." The Venezuela comparison came up repeatedly. Trump has described Venezuela as the perfect scenario, a situation in which economic pressure and targeted military action produce a controllable political outcome without prolonged instability. Leaders can be picked, he said. Defense Secretary Hegseth echoed the same position. The stated American goal is the complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program and the end of Iran's capacity to fund proxy terrorism. So here is where the two sides stand. Iran's position: we will not negotiate unless the U.S. and Israel justify their aggression. We are not asking for a ceasefire. We need a permanent end to the war. America's position: there will be no deal without unconditional surrender. We will pick Iran's next leader. These are not two positions searching for a middle ground. These are two positions describing two entirely different wars, one that ends at a negotiating table and one that ends when one side is no longer capable of fighting. And now the layer underneath the layer, the story that completely reframes everything Araghchi said on television. While Iran's foreign minister was telling NBC's anchor there was no request for a ceasefire and no reason to negotiate, something else was happening in the shadows. According to officials briefed on the matter and reported by the New York Times, operatives from Iran's Ministry of Intelligence quietly reached out and indirectly to the CIA through another country's intelligence service with an offer to discuss terms for ending the conflict. Let that sentence sit for a moment. Iran's public face: we need to continue fighting. Iran's private back channel: we would like to discuss terms for ending this. This is not hypocrisy. Or at least, not only hypocrisy. It is the oldest and most rational behavior in wartime diplomacy. Countries fight publicly and talk privately simultaneously because admitting you want out is interpreted as weakness, which invites harder terms at the negotiating table. But here's the complication that the New York Times reporting identifies. And it is a complication that is more dangerous than simple diplomatic double talk. The back-channel contact landed at a moment when Iran's leadership structure had been thrown into such deep disarray by continued Israeli strikes that it was unclear who could actually commit Iran to any ceasefire agreement. As the report put it, even if Iran's security establishment decided it wanted a pause, nobody could be sure whether a deal could survive the pace of strikes and counterstrikes, or even who the valid signatory would be. The more Iran's government is degraded, the harder it becomes to negotiate, because you need an intact government to make and enforce a deal. And every strike on every command center, every leadership compound, every military installation makes the question of who speaks for Iran harder to answer. Trump himself acknowledged it directly. Most of the people we had in mind are dead. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody. That is the American president describing, in plain language, the problem of negotiating with a government you're simultaneously trying to dismantle. There is one more piece of context from IRGC's Sunday interview that deserves its own section, because it confirms something that 4 American intelligence sources had told NBC News on Friday, and that changes the entire strategic picture. When host Kristen Welker pressed IRGC on whether Russia was providing Iran with support, he did not deny it. He did not deflect. He said, "They are helping us in many different directions." That sentence, "many different directions," confirms what American intelligence officials had already told NBC News on Friday. Russia is providing Iran with intelligence on the location of American forces in the Middle East, including intelligence that could help Iran locate American warships. Think about what that means operationally. The U.S. Navy has aircraft carrier strike groups operating in the region. Those carriers are the most powerful surface warships in human history, but they are not invisible. If Russia's satellite network and signals intelligence infrastructure is feeding Iran real-time or near real-time location data on American ships, Iran's anti-ship missile doctrine becomes significantly more dangerous. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, the USS Harry S. Truman, American destroyers and cruisers. If Iran knows where they are, not from its own sensors, but from Russia's far superior surveillance architecture, then American naval force protection calculations have to be adjusted accordingly. Russia is not firing weapons at American forces. Russia is providing the targeting data to a country that is firing weapons at American forces. The legal and strategic distinction between those two things is real, but the operational difference is narrowing. Europe's gas prices are up 85%. Russia is watching, and Russia is helping Iran find American ships. There's a story running underneath the ceasefire debate that deserves to be told directly, because it is the story Iran's foreign minister keeps returning to in every interview, and because the American government's own preliminary findings make it impossible to dismiss. On a day during the first week of this conflict, a strike hit an elementary school in the Iranian city of Manab. Iranian officials say 171 children were killed. IRGC cited the strike in his Sunday interview. They are killing girl students. The U.S. military launched an investigation. By Friday, March 6th, the preliminary findings indicated it was increasingly likely that a U.S. munition was responsible. The Trump administration briefed congressional members. A senior U.S. official told reporters it was looking more and more like an American weapon hit that school. President Trump, when asked about it, said he believed Iran was responsible, but his own administration's preliminary findings pointed in the opposite direction. This is the moral weight that sits beneath the ceasefire debate. Iran's foreign minister is not inventing the civilian casualties when he raises them on American television. The numbers, whatever the true count, are real. The children are real. And the question of who fired the weapon that killed them is one that the U.S. government's own investigators believe they can answer. IRGC's argument to American viewers is explicit. You ask us for a ceasefire while killing our people. This doesn't work like this. Whatever you think of Iran's government, whatever you think of the strategic necessity of this war, that argument, coming from a foreign minister of a country whose children may have been killed by American bombs, is one that the United States cannot simply dismiss at a press conference. While the ceasefire debate plays out on television, the war itself continued to expand through the weekend. Oil prices broke through $100 per barrel on Sunday evening, exactly as analysts had warned they would if the disruption extended beyond a week. Trump posted on Truth Social that a gain in short-term oil prices was a very small price to pay for destroying Iran's nuclear threat. American consumers watching their gas prices climb will decide whether they agree with that assessment. The U.S. government ordered non-emergency staff to leave Saudi Arabia, the first such departure order for the kingdom since this war began. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh cited heightened risks from armed conflict, terrorism, and missile and drone attacks from Yemen and Iran. A drone was intercepted near Riyadh. The first reported deaths in Saudi Arabia from this conflict occurred over the weekend. The war has now reached the soil of the largest oil producer on earth. Israel escalated in Lebanon. The IDF ordered residents south of the Litani River to evacuate as operations against Hezbollah intensified. Nearly 400 people have been killed in Lebanon since Monday, adding a second simultaneous front to the conflict. The Sonangol Namibe, a Bahamas-flagged crude oil tanker, was struck near Iraq's Khor al-Zubair port. The IRGC said its forces hit a U.S. tanker in the northern Gulf. The tanker was on fire. Strait of Hormuz traffic remains effectively frozen, with only emergency movements. Trump, according to Bloomberg reporting, is also weighing deploying special forces on the ground to seize Tehran's near-bomb-grade uranium stockpile, the highly enriched material that, if secured or destroyed, would represent the primary original objective of this war. The Senate tried and failed to pass a war powers resolution that would restrict Trump's ability to continue military operations without congressional authorization. It did not have the votes to overcome a presidential veto. The war is not narrowing, it is widening. Every day that the ceasefire conversation goes nowhere is a day that Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey, and the international shipping lanes absorb more of it. Let me give you the 3 realistic scenarios for how this war ends, because understanding the options is understanding the stakes. Scenario 1, Iran collapses politically from within. This is Trump's Venezuela model. Sustained strikes destroy enough of the regime's military and economic infrastructure that the system fractures from within, either through a coup, a popular uprising, or a negotiated handover of power by IRGC elements who decide that survival requires accommodation. The problem with this scenario, the U.S. National Intelligence Council assessed before the war began that the Iranian regime was unlikely to be toppled even by a large-scale assault. Iran is an 85 million person country with parallel chains of command, ideological institutions, and a security apparatus designed to survive decapitation by redistributing authority downward. Venezuela had 30 million people, a fragile economy, and no nuclear program. Iran is not Venezuela. Scenario 2, a negotiated ceasefire through back channels. Iran's Ministry of Intelligence has already reached out to the CIA indirectly. The bones of a deal potentially exist, a formal end to Iran's nuclear weapons program, verifiable under international monitoring, in exchange for a guaranteed halt to military operations and a path to sanctions relief. The problem? Trump has said unconditional surrender. Iran has said it will not negotiate. The CIA back-channel contact produced no agreement. And even if both sides wanted a deal, the question of who speaks for Iran, with its leadership shattered and its chain of command degraded, is not a question with a clean answer. Scenario 3. Military exhaustion on both sides produces a de facto pause. Iran's missile launchers are being destroyed. The IDF says 60% are already gone. Iran's rate of fire has dropped 86% from its peak. The military capacity to sustain the current pace of attack degrades over time. American and Israeli strikes continue until Iran's ability to threaten the region is reduced to a level that both Washington and Jerusalem assess as tolerable, without a formal agreement. This scenario ends not with a ceasefire, but with a gradual reduction in intensity. Both sides declare victory on different terms. The nuclear question remains unresolved, and the next crisis begins. None of these scenarios has a clear timeline. None of them happens in the next 14 days. Here is what Sunday's Meet the Press interview actually revealed. It revealed a foreign minister of a country under sustained American and Israeli bombardment, sitting calmly in front of a camera, telling the American public directly, "We need to continue fighting for the sake of our people," and meaning it. It revealed a back-channel contact, Iran's intelligence service reaching out to the CIA through a third country, that shows the private face of the conflict is more complicated than the Public Defiance suggests. It revealed Russia openly confirming that it is helping Iran in many different directions, including, according to American intelligence sources, providing location data on U.S. warships. And it revealed the unbridgeable gap between two positions: America's demand for unconditional surrender and Iran's demand for a permanent end to the war before any ceasefire is even considered. Between those two positions is where the war lives. And while the two sides talk past each other on television, on Meet the Press and NBC Nightly News, the oil passes $100 a barrel. Saudi Arabia tells American diplomats to leave. Lebanese families evacuate south of the Litani River. And somewhere in the CIA, someone is waiting for Iran's intelligence service to call back through whatever third country's service is carrying the messages. The ceasefire Iran rejected on live TV might still be the one they accept in private. The question is whether both governments can survive long enough, politically and militarily, to get to that conversation. If this video gave you the full picture, share it. Subscribe if you want this level of depth every day. I'll see you in the next one.